Welcome back, friends. We are talking about weight distribution hitches. Now, I have made a video on this topic. However, it was in a different context. I was just kind of explaining how they work and, the good and the bad of them a little bit. I want to get more into when you should buy one, why you should buy one, and if you need one. It's kind of funny because in the car trailer world of kind of just hauling cars, or you're maybe like a small tractor for your house or stuff like that, box trailers, I would say almost nobody talks about weight distribution hitches or sway hitches. Very rarely do I see it. There's a lot of times where people will, they'll have a half-ton truck, let's say, that is just barely rated for the trailer they're towing, and they'll just hook it up and go, and the truck squats, and they go about their day. But in the RV world, it seems as though it's almost the opposite. Everybody talks about weight distribution, and it's almost like an unwritten rule that if you don't have a weight distribution hitch with an RV, you're doing it wrong. And I just want to talk a little bit about those two extremes, and as with most things in life, the truth is somewhere in the middle. So let's start with the car trailer, kind of box trailer, side of things. The important thing to note with these trailer types, as opposed to a camper, is that their center of gravity tends to be lower. Even a box trailer, generally speaking, if you're putting like a car in it, the center of gravity is not really any different than an open deck trailer, because the box of the box trailer, the upper parts of it, are generally pretty light. Now, if you have a box trailer with a lot of overhead cabinets and you have tools in them, this might not apply to you. But for the most part, your general kind of what I'll call U-Haul style box trailer will have a pretty low center of gravity when loaded and frankly when empty. Now, that's important because regardless of trailer length, center of gravity plays a huge part in the way that the trailer affects the tow vehicle. On a low center of gravity vehicle, if you just take a dot and draw and put a dot above the, probably the front tire of the axles on the trailer, let's just say that's your center of gravity, forward and back, left and right, and up and down, okay? That dot doesn't have a lot of, cantilevered weight around the pivot point of that front axle to put a bunch of force onto the hitch of the truck. So basically what happens is when you hit a big bump, any weight that is on or forward of the front axle of the trailer kind of gets rotationally pivoted onto the tongue of the trailer, onto the hitch of the truck, and that's what gives you that pogo stick effect. And then obviously the lighter duty your tow vehicle is, kind of the more the back end's going to bounce and pogo stick around. Shock tuning plays into that. There's a lot of different stuff, but that's kind of just the general rule for that. With an RV, that center of gravity, instead of being, this far from the tires, goes way up, right? So let's just say that center of gravity is now in the exact same position forward and back on the trailer, but it's higher. Well, now when you hit those bumps, all of a sudden there's just more pounds of force on the hitch of the truck pushing down, and so typically with RVs you get a lot more of that pogo stick effect, and then that's why people run to weight distribution hitches so quickly. Rightfully so, by the way, but that's really more the reason why RVs are so synonymous with weight distribution, is because even for the same weight of trailer, so if I have a car and a car trailer and it's 8,000 pounds, or I have an 8,000 pound RV, almost every time the RV is going to be longer and have a higher center of gravity. And so those forces are a lot worse. Because also, by the way, a longer wheelbase of the trailer increases that force, because think of it like a breaker bar, right? The longer the breaker bar, the less you have to push on it to put more torque on a bolt. And it's the exact same principle, essentially in reverse. So with all that said, that's only half the equation, right? Sway. Well, this one's a lot more easy to explain. And I think most people probably know this, but the just wind profile of an RV, just being a big box, catches crosswinds, even catches forward winds more. and just pushes your tow vehicle around more for a given weight of a trailer. Sometimes an empty box trailer, that's like a real tall one, or an empty RV, will actually be worse than if you load it a little bit, because it just moves around on the road more because it's physically lighter. So that's kind of an interesting tidbit too. But anyway, anything with an enclosed box like that can push the tow vehicle around. And you'll even see this with tractor trailers. I mean, a loaded tractor trailer or an unloaded tractor trailer, you'll see on videos on YouTube and stuff, they'll flip over in heavy winds because the wind will blow them over. So that effect can be as extreme as that. So something to kind of consider. That's where sway control comes in. So if you have enough tongue weight, you shouldn't ever get a situation where your trailer becomes out of control with sway, i.e. the harmonics of your hitch setup are such that the trailer starts swaying more and more and more and more and more than until you crash, right? It should never get to that point, but it can just be very uncomfortable, the amount of sway that a trailer has when you're towing an RV with a lighter duty truck, especially. Even a heavier duty truck, it can sway more than you'd think. And you're just kind of getting blown around the lane like this, and it's like uncomfortable. You're white knuckling driving experience. So adding sway distribution, to lock the tow vehicle to the trailer a little bit, or add a dampener, basically, right? You're basically adding a shock between your hitch and your trailer in the same way you would add a shock between your axle and the body of your truck. It's just a horizontal shock. Think of it that way. By doing that, you greatly reduce that sway motion. And most weight distribution hitches also have a sway component built in, and they all do it in different ways, so it just depends on the brand you have. And yes, there are some hitches that only have weight distribution, and there are sway bars that don't require a weight distribution hitch at all, and it's just sway control. And that brings me to my next point. On, say, a half-ton truck with that 8,000-pound RV, you essentially will never be able to make it tow as well without a weight and sway distribution hitch than you can with, because the truck itself is fairly light. You are putting a ton of tongue weight on the rear end of it, so any half-ton truck will be squatting pretty far with that, and you're going to get that pogo stick effect. You're going to get some sway. It's just going to tow like crap. That weight distribution hitch reduces your tongue weight, your effective tongue weight, distributes it back to the front of the truck. So let's just say that your truck is empty. Your truck has 60% of its weight on the front axle, and 40% of its weight on the rear axle. When you hook that really heavy camper up, let's just say that your weight balance goes to 60-40, but in the other direction, right? 60% rear, 40% front. And that would honestly probably be conservative. It's probably more like 70-30. But let's just say it goes 60-40. That weight distribution hitch might then get you back to like 50-50. And that makes a huge difference. If you can get your weight balance as close to 50-50 as reasonably possible, that's generally where you're going to tow the best on like a half ton. Now, on a diesel truck, like a diesel 1 ton, this is where it's different. So let's say you have that same 8,000-pound camper. Well, a diesel truck has such a heavy engine, and let's just say it's a long bed, so it's really kind of the worst case scenario. Your weight balance is like 70-30 front. It's very, very front heavy. So by putting that 8,000-pound trailers, let's say 1,000-pound tongue weight on the rear end of the truck, you're actually helping your balance and drastically improving that truck's handling ability, because you're making it much less rear light. So in that case, like, you would not want a weight distribution hitch. And I've like tested this before. It will actually tow worse if you put a weight distribution hitch on it, because you'll be closer to that empty truck distribution, and that's not a good spot. Like, HD trucks are not set up to be driven empty. They're set up to be driven loaded. A half-ton truck is set up more or less to be driven empty, and that's why that weight distribution comes into play, because you are mimicking the empty experience in a sense with that distribution hitch. Whereas with the 1-ton truck, it's like you don't want to mimic the empty experience. You want to mimic a loaded experience. So on that same 1-ton, if you had the diesel and let's just say you had a 16,000 pound bumper pull, like real heavy bumper pull camper, then you might want a weight distribution hitch, depending, right? At minimum, you're going to want sway, and for that you can just add a separate sway bar. You don't need the whole weight distribution hitch. And really, again, what it comes down to is if you go to a cat scale and weigh everything out, if that truck is even that 1 ton, if it's close to like 50-50 distribution, it's probably going to tow pretty well, for what it is. So you might not need the distribution. Now, that's, again, that's something you can play around with and kind of just see where it lands. But a lot of good options as well, if you don't think you need weight distribution, is running any of these like Springer hitches where they have dampening in the hitch. That'll just help kind of remove some of that pogo stick feeling and dampen the trailer to the truck connection while not distributing weight to the front end that you don't need to distribute. Another kind of caveat of this is a gas 3/4 ton or 1 ton. Even if that, let's say it's a single rear wheel truck and it's rated to, from the hitch tow the same amount or roughly the same amount as a diesel, because that's relatively common. The bumper pull rating is not that much different between diesels and gassers sometimes, because it's more of like a chassis limitation. And if that's the case, you're going to actually potentially want weight distribution on that gas truck because the front end isn't as heavy, in that you might not want on the diesel. So every individual truck is different. Like there's scenarios where you're not going to want distribution, or you are, and depending on the trailer. So if I take this same argument on all these vehicles and I choose a dump trailer, well, the dump trailers are so kind of heavy for their wheelbase. If it's a 12-foot dump trailer and it's 10,000 pounds loaded, even a half ton that's rated for it is probably not going to have that much problem towing it without weight distribution, because it just doesn't have that rotational force on the hitch like a camper does. So weight is by no means the whole story when you're towing. There are just so many other factors to it. With that being said, as always, guys, thanks for watching. God bless America, and I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.